Some houses have secrets. Not the kind you find in old letters or forgotten photographs. The kind that have been deliberately hidden. Sealed behind walls. Locked away from every person who ever lived there. And some secrets, when they are finally uncovered, do not just change the way you see that house. They change the way you see every house you have ever walked into. This is one of those stories. Now let me take you back to where it all started. Sarah and Marcus had been looking for their forever home for 2 years. 2 years of open houses, disappointing viewings, properties that looked perfect online and felt wrong the moment you stepped through the door. Then they found it. 4 bedrooms, large garden, quiet tree-lined street in a small town in Connecticut. The kind of house that made Sarah cry on the way home from the viewing because she wanted it so badly. They offered $20,000 below asking price, expecting to negotiate. The seller accepted within 4 hours. No counteroffer, no negotiation, just yes. Marcus thought they had gotten lucky. He would spend the rest of his life reconsidering that thought. The estate agent mentioned almost as an afterthought that the previous owners had relocated abroad suddenly, hence the quick sale, hence the price. She said it the way people say things they have been told to say, smoothly, quickly, moving on before you can ask a follow-up question. Neither Sarah nor Marcus thought to ask one. They moved in on a Saturday in early spring. Their daughter Lily was 7 years old. She had her own room for the first time in her life and she thought it was the most magical thing that had ever happened to her. For the first 3 weeks everything was perfect. And then the smell started. Not a bad smell exactly, not the kind that makes you check for damp or call a plumber. Something more subtle and more unsettling than that. Like the inside of a very old library, musty and dense and layered, mixed with something metallic underneath, something that did not belong in a house this recently renovated. Sarah assumed it was just the house settling. Old buildings have their own particular atmosphere. She lit candles and opened windows and told herself it would fade. It did not fade. Then Lily started talking to the corner. Every night, same corner of her bedroom, same quiet one-sided conversation, the kind children have with imaginary friends, except that Lily had never had an imaginary friend before. Sarah stood outside Lily's door one evening and listened. Lily was saying, I know, but they will not understand yet. Sarah pushed the door open. Lily looked up completely unsurprised and said, she says not to be scared. Sarah asked who she was talking to. Lily pointed at the corner and said, the woman who lives in the wall. Sarah took Lily to a child psychologist the following week. The psychologist said it was completely normal behavior for creative children adjusting to a new environment, an imaginary friend, a coping mechanism, nothing to worry about. Sarah wanted to believe that. She almost managed it. Until Marcus found the wall. He was measuring the hallway one Sunday afternoon, planning where to hang a series of family photographs, when he noticed something that made him put the tape measure down and stand very still for a long time. The hallway measured 4 feet shorter on the inside than the outside of the house. He measured it again. And again. Then he went outside and measured the exterior wall with a different tape measure. 4 feet of house was completely unaccounted for. He went back inside and stood in the hallway and ran his hands along the wall. It felt solid, it looked solid, it had been papered and painted and there was a coat rack on it and a small table with a lamp. But 4 feet of house did not exist on the inside that existed on the outside. He pulled the coat rack away from the wall. He pulled the small table away. He pulled the corner of the wallpaper back carefully. And found a door. It had been painted over so many times, so carefully, so deliberately, that it had almost become part of the wall itself. The hinges were on the inside, which was why there was no visible seam from the outside. It took Marcus 2 hours and every tool he owned to get it open. What was inside stopped him completely. A room. Approximately 8 feet wide and 6 feet long. No windows. A single wooden chair positioned in the exact center facing the door as if whoever sat in it had been waiting for someone to open it. And on the walls. Every inch of every wall. Floor to ceiling. Covered in handwriting. The same sentence written over and over and over again in increasingly desperate script, the letters getting larger and more jagged as they climbed toward the ceiling. She can hear you through the walls. Marcus called the police. What followed was one of the most unusual investigations in Connecticut's recent history. Forensic analysts, historians, structural engineers, all called to a suburban family home on a quiet tree-lined street to examine a room that should not have existed. The room dated back to the original construction of the house in 1887. But here is the detail that made every investigator in that house go very quiet. The room had been sealed from the outside. Not locked, sealed, with plaster and wallpaper and paint applied in layers over decades, each layer added by a different hand at a different time. Someone had not just hidden this room. Multiple people across multiple generations had worked to keep it hidden. The handwriting on the walls belonged to a woman named Clara Voss. Born 1861, disappeared from all official records in 1891. Historical records showed that Clara had been the wife of Edward Voss, a prominent local businessman who had built the house in 1887. In 1889, Edward Voss had filed papers to have Clara committed to an asylum. The stated reason was acute moral insanity, a diagnosis used almost exclusively at that time to silence women who were considered inconvenient. But there were no asylum records for Clara after 1889. No death certificate. No record of discharge. No record of her existence anywhere after that date. Just silence. And a room. And walls covered in the same sentence written by a woman who had been put there by her husband and simply never let out. The investigators found one more thing in that room. Behind the wooden chair, scratched into the baseboard with what appeared to be a hairpin or a nail. A date. March 14, 1891. And beneath it 2 words. She knows. Nobody has ever established what Clara knew, who she was referring to, whether she was referring to herself in the third person or to someone on the other side of that wall. The investigation was eventually closed without conclusion. The structural report recommended the room be properly integrated into the house. Sarah and Marcus did not integrate it. They sealed it back up. They did not tell the next owners about it when they sold the house 8 months later. I have thought about that decision a long time. I understand it. I am not sure I would have done differently. The new family moved in on a Saturday in autumn. Their youngest child is 5 years old. She has already started talking to the corner of her bedroom. Her parents think it is an imaginary friend. They have not measured the hallway yet. Drop a comment below. What would you have done if you found that room? Would you have stayed or left immediately? I need to know. If this story gave you chills, share it with someone who will never look at their walls the same way again. Subscribe, because every story on this channel lives in the space between what we can explain and what we cannot. In the next video, I am taking you somewhere darker than anything we have covered so far. A cabin. A Friday night. And a door that should never have been opened. That is all I will say. Make sure you are subscribed. Because once you hear this one, you will never forget it.